Good day, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the post-Spartan Games interviews, this time with the first couple of OCR, Ryan Atkins and Lindsay Webster. Ryan, certainly a favorite to win the male side. Lindsay, certainly a favorite to be in the top three. Obviously, once again, cannot reveal results, but let's talk about how it went for them. Away we go.
Yeah.
Ryan, why don't you rap your favorite Eminem song for us? I'm Slim Shady. You said real shady.
I really like what's the new one? I could swallow a bottle of.
Oh, yeah, that one's good.
And look like Godzilla. Better hit the deck like a Godzilla. My whole squad's in here walking across like the something.
I don't know. I kind of like all Eminem's stuff. You know, it's all pretty good.
You know, I don't discriminate.
Have you ever heard
I don't discriminate between M's.
Kermit rap before? Well, you just did.
Yeah.
When Ryan doesn't know the words to rap songs, he just kind of starts mumbling, and then when he knows the words again, he like starts speaking more
Okay,
loudly.
that's really good.
It's really funny.
Are we recording? Is this on?
It sure is.
This thing on?
It sure is. Hey, Lindsay and Ryan.
Podcast
Hi.
that we've ever experienced. It's early. We both needed our coffee. No tea.
Well, the good news is we survived the Spartan Games, the battle of the fittest. Joe only messed with the event at the very beginning for about 2 hours.
And then he had
left.
to leave, and everybody was like, oh, good.
And then he was supposed to come back Sunday night, but apparently his son broke his collarbone.
No.
Ooh.
Something,
I
and
didn't
then
know that.
he didn't come back.
Oh,
And
no.
everyone was like, yes!
So
Thank goodness for collarbones.
If he was there the whole weekend, you would have had a very different experience.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
are well aware. I said that to the guys. I was like appreciative of how, I guess, professionally the event was put on, which I feel like a lot of people would disagree with. But I came into it saying, like, thinking that honestly we were going to be like, we heard we'd be sleeping in a barn. And I thought we were going to be sleeping like in an unheated barn.
We were sleeping
On
in a
the
barn.
floor.
And it was like literally the nicest barn
Yeah,
you
it
could
was-
ever.
Yeah, it was like a wedding venue barn. It was heated. We had Wi-Fi. They got us cots. We had like sheets and pillows. Like I brought a blanket because I was sure that they weren't going to give us anything but like a sheet. And I didn't even expect a pillow. So I don't know. And then they let us sleep every night. Like, whereas I thought that they were going to be getting us up at like awful hours and we were going to be
I
up through
had
the night.
2 pillows.
Yeah, you had 2 pillows.
Well, I'm gonna say this because we don't have to spend a lot of time covering the Joe having us do chores business or the Joe interruptions, and you know, Nicole talked about how frustrated she was for the staff, for Mike and for Nate who had put this thing together. But I really thought if there was a time for them to like really like just say, Joe, if you do this, we're gonna walk. Like that would have been the time to do it. And like.
Yeah.
And like,
They
and under any other circumstance, I think Joe wouldn't care. He'd be like, fine, I'll replace you with somebody cheaper. But for this, he'd be like, fine. Like, I think like the whole, like letting somebody else race business, like it should just, the staff should have been like, Joe, we're not doing this. And if you are, or we're just going to leave now. And when if we have the 24, we promised we're working, we'll come back. Like that would have been the time to actually, because yeah, he's the boss and what are you going to do and blah, blah, blah. But I think if there was one time to go, you know what? This is fucking stupid. Because honestly, if he was there the whole time, he would have been like, you know what? Let's do this instead. Let's do this. And they would have just been, you know, it would have been far worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because they're like, well, we obviously don't want to do this, but you're like our mega boss, so like we also don't want to lose our job and like.
Yeah.
I heard that like after Joe left, he called. I forget who it was. Maybe it was Mike, and said like, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. Like maybe I shouldn't have done that. And he kind of like ate crow a bit and kind of like was pretty like for like the first time ever was kind of like, you know what? Maybe you guys are right and I'm wrong.
Which
and
Mike and
shouldn't
Nathan
have done that. And they were like,
celebrated.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
But a couple people said that like they really think that Mike Morris and Nathan could put on like a world-class event. But as soon as Joe touches it, it all like falls apart. Which
Yeah. If
like no offense to Joe, but I'm also fairly confident he'll never listen to this. So
that's you would be correct.
yeah.
What Joe usually does is he'll hear something third hand and send me a text with like 5 other people and be like, I heard blah, blah, blah. And I have since learned to ignore those texts. Like I used to defend myself and email him and be like, oh no, Joe, this is what actually happened. Now I just ignore it because he's having a thought and then it it moves on. But yeah,
Well,
as soon as it was,
sorry, you can talk now.
well, it does this weird thing where it there's a thing where like some people, I don't know what it is, it'll record like if we literally can't talk over each other, like you're silent. I don't know what that is. Sometimes it doesn't happen in Zoom.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, hang on, let me see if it's in preferences.
Yeah, I mean, Mike and Nate really turned it around for sure. Like after that first day, I think it was like very prevalent that they were quite disappointed with themselves. A couple things like screwed up, and the last, I would say, 2 days of the event were like pretty world class. Like they listened to all of our suggestions, took them into account. They at a certain point realized that they only had 24 athletes to deal with and not like 10,000 like they usually do. So they reviewed footage and made sure that like penalties were issued correctly, and they took all, I don't know, they like readjusted schedules according to like, I don't know, how the athletes were, like when we were ready,
timing and filming,
timing and filming, and it just like
and
the first day was, but it was a very uphill spiral.
Yeah, listen, I've said for years that Mike's amazing. Mike is like the glue that holds that company together in terms of production. He's been there since the beginning. He understands the sport. He listens to the athletes. He listens to the average person. He knows what he's doing from a production standpoint. And so, you know, when you hear things happening with the company, whether it's, you know, whatever the random things that come from the office that are always kind of like, oh, that makes you scratch your head, you know, there's a quality product. The same way I used to say the same thing about Eli and Nolan with Tough Mudder, right? Like those guys were the shit. They knew their job. They knew what they were doing. Sometimes they're handed a bad hand of cards, like make a 2-lap race because we think it's cheaper. That was not their idea, right?
Yeah.
But they're good soldiers. They took it for the team and were like, hey, do you guys like this? Even though they knew it was horrible. So anyway, so yeah, I love Mike. Mike's awesome. We've argued, we've battled over stuff, but yeah, Mike is the good. So
Ethan has the patience of a saint. So
the patience of a saint, is that what you said?
Yeah. He listened to a lot of bitching and whining.
Yeah.
Well, I Hunter said that people would say like, that sounds impossible. Who could lift such a weight? He said yesterday about, or vice versa with the strong people versus endurance. And I thought, well, isn't that what the event was about? They knew there was going to be multiple disciplines would be tested.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. To an extent,
I think they really pushed the boundaries though. Like, like if you make a 240-pound linebacker run for 6 hours, or you make a
at least
you make like an 85-pound like 5'0" adventure racer try to lift 200 or 165 pounds 10 times, like that's literally the limit of like at the limit or beyond of like what those athletes can accomplish. So,
yeah, I couldn't lift the deadlift, spoiler alert, so I just had to like skip it and take a 5-minute penalty. And at first I thought that it was we had to lift it 1 time, and I was like, oh great, like I'll try. But then when I heard we had to lift it 10, I was like, I will get hurt. And this is also at the last day of competition, so like even the CrossFit girls were saying like, yeah, that farmer's carry is like heavy for us. I would not lift under these circumstances ever when I'm like this tired.
Yeah, there are people who are like, you know, professional CrossFitters who like are also like strength and conditioning coaches who are saying like these weights are too heavy. Like for these athletes in these circumstances, they're too heavy.
There was no like
Spartan's like
to that either.
All right.
Like Spartan never told us that we were. I mean, we had a hunch that we'd be doing like Atlas stones, but they never told us like you're going to be lifting heavy. They said you'd be doing DecaFit, in which the hardest weight is for the women 33 pounds, not 165. So
this is where you gotta step outside your bubble, right? So I like Mike, I like Yancey, right? But they get so fired up about what they're doing. And it's like, maybe we should talk to somebody in the CrossFit space, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
not the athletes performing, because that gives them an advantage, but let's talk to a couple people and say, here's what we're looking to design based on.
That's exactly what Ryan said.
I literally said those things to Mike and Nate. I was like, you need an athlete like myself or like, Hunter, who's not competing, that you can run all these weights and all these things by, who will sign an NDA and say, I won't, I'm not going to tell anyone what the events are, but, 100 pounds per arm farmer's carry, that's too much. Or
well, especially based on the load, right? You've already done X, Y, and Z, and can we do this? And that's what separates the CrossFit Games, is they do that, right? Dave Castro literally tests it. He has a couple of athletes do these things. Now, I don't expect Spartan to test it. That's a lot of work. You got to pay somebody, blah, blah, but at least sit down with a scratch pad, right?
Yeah.
Because something like an obstacle race, you can just throw up there, right? Some people are going to pass the obstacle. Some people are going to fail. They're not going to have Gibbons up there, right? They're just Spartan obstacles. So you don't really need to test that. But, I think that's, and again, that's just like, you can't ever be too myopic. You've got to be able to not just think this is going to be awesome, man. You know what I mean? It's like, you got to be able to, again, I love Yancey, but all Yancey told me for, cause of course I'm trying to do my best and get information from all my, sources. And Yancey, I knew a lot was going on, and he was super excited about a lot of things, but clearly didn't consult outside of it.
Yeah, he kept telling me like, I promise you'll have no trouble with any of it. Like, this was the day before the heavy lifting event. And granted, like, there was a marathon runner there, and she did all 10 deadlifts. Like, the last 2 were really sketchy.
Oh yeah.
But she could do it. But I don't deadlift. Like, I think Nicole could have done it, and she's like lighter than I am. But because I don't know the form, I don't know technique.
Yeah, and like Lindsay asked if there would be any barbell or any pull-ups, and they said no, and then there was.
But I mean, at the same, so like, I sound like I'm complaining a lot, but I also was like, I had just watched these like heavy lifting athletes do a 5-hour bike ride and a 6-hour run, and I was like, they finished that. Like, I'm not going to complain about this lifting event. I'm just going to do my best and try. And there really was like, they pushed the spectrum on both ends, and it made it really hard to try and do well and like rack up points. Like, some events I would do really well, and then others it was just
so like. So what do you think? Because in my mind, and again, I guess I'm too myopic in that I think, well, a 5-hour run is fair, because if they're walking the last 3 hours, that's on them, and they don't get very many miles. But I guess, I don't know. I guess just because you can always go slow, which is different than weight. You can't sort of lift weight. You have to do it or not do it. This is what I learned when I did high rocks. Like, I'm used to just kind of half-assing an obstacle race, and then they gave me the sled to push, and it was like, whoa, there's no way to half-ass this. You either push it or don't, right? So with running, it's like, oh, you could walk, whatever. So do you think it would have been better to maybe just give a distance? Or do you think it would be better to say, okay, look, it's 3 hour, it's run a marathon, and there's a cutoff at 4 hours or 5 hours? You know what I mean? How do you think they should have done it for make it equal for the strength people?
Yeah, and this is something we've wrestled with. Like, for instance,
wrestled with?
Oh, yeah, like
they had to do minimum laps, so they didn't even have to run 6 hours. They had to do, what was it? So they had to do 3 laps, I think it was.
Yeah, they had to do.
So a lot of them were done at 2.5, and they like could walk it.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I think that there's a bigger toll on like my body of like for running, like racing hard, running for 6 hours than there would be on Hunter's body for like doing a DecaFit as hard as you can for 10 minutes.
But also like in a DecaFit, like he literally will finish it faster than you. So he finishes in 13 minutes and Ryan finishes in like 15. So we're even working longer in those events. And like for an Atlas stone, like it takes a lot less energy for them to lift up one more stone than it does for us to run an extra 3 hours at race pace. Like running for 6 hours at race pace takes so much out of you.
And you had to go race pace because they had ultra runners there and you wanted to make sure you won. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, they had, I mean, they had a really good mountain biker there, and they had a few really good runners, Aaron included, and that I had to like race for hours on end. Where they didn't have a single athlete that could compete against Hunter in like any of the strength events. So Hunter basically could have softballed all the strength events, coasted through the endurance events, and then just, end of story. Whereas I had to like fight tooth and nail for every event that I was, that I was good at,
And then in the lifting too, like, so Faith was probably like the strongest girl there. But so for the Atlas stones, let's say like the third stone already weighed more than I do. And I have to lift it. And there's 2 more stones after that we like have the potential to lift. But the thing is, like, the 5th stone, which was 165 pounds, probably weighs the same amount as she does. So like I don't know, how do I put that into words? Like the proportion of like body to strength ratio, I guess, was just like so skewed in certain events like that. But you should talk about your idea for the scoring system.
Yeah, I mean,
you had a really good idea.
I thought that doing a lap based and a minimum was kind of not the best solution, because like you said, if I compete 6 laps and a bunch of other athletes complete 3 laps, then that's going to tire me out twice as much as them. And it's not like I had to complete half of the, decafit, or half of, the wrestling, or half of any of those other events. I had to do all of them. So I thought it should have been like a full distance. Everyone has to do whatever, 20 miles. And then everyone would get ranked as a percentage of the winner. And then that would encourage the winner to go faster. And that would encourage everybody from, 2nd through 9th to try to increase, because they would get a greater percentage of points. And on top of that, I think they should reward first, second, third with like little bonus points structures. Mm-hmm. And then you say, okay, well, what if people can't run the 20 miles? Well, if you can't run 20 miles and you only get 15, then maybe it's you get some kind of penalty. They take away points.
Right.
So that's how I would have done it. I think that would be like the most fair way. And it would have worked across the board. It would have worked for Decafit, because a percentage of 15 minutes versus a percentage of 5 hours, it's still a percentage. So
correct.
It encouraged Hunter, who or whoever was winning the strength events, to like go harder, because like Hunter could have just said, oh, I'm going to win, so I'm just going to like go at 90% and save myself. And I mean, I think they need a way to encourage athletes to push their hardest to the finish line, no matter what position they're in. If it's in first,
do you think they would listen to all that and do that next year, if there's a next year? Because that definitely makes sense. Everything you just said makes perfect sense. Aaron tried to explain this to me. Nicole tried to explain this to me. I didn't understand. Sometimes it takes me a little bit. Aaron, well, I know you're an engineer, right? Right. Yep. You're an engineer. You have that kind of mind, right? But Aaron just said that runners didn't have to work as hard. He just was trying to explain. I didn't get it. So now it makes perfect sense. And what you just said makes perfect sense. And let's give Spartan a little bit of leeway. It is the first one, right? It is the first event they've ever done like this. So there certainly is going to be some things that like, you don't see it until you see it in the field. Like, oh, fuck, we need to fix this, right? So, but do you think they'd actually listen to that? And actually, if there is one next year, they'd do it?
Yeah. So 2 things. I think they would listen to it. And I've already told them this. And I've had a lot of people like kind of nod their heads in agreement. So yeah, I think they would listen to it. And I'd also like to say that they did a really good job of the whole event. Like everything they did was, nothing, it wasn't perfect, but they did really well, and they wanted the event to be fair, and they wanted the event to be just, and they wanted what they thought was the fittest athlete to win at the end. So I think they accomplished that, and they did like a heck of a job, given they only had maybe a month or 6 weeks to throw it together, and they only had limited resources and limited space, and to work within the constraints of COVID. And there's a lot of bookends that they had to like butt up against, and it was awesome. It was really awesome.
Yeah, we've just been like complaining about things, but actually there was so many positives that were not even.
It looks like there was definitely a lot of camaraderie across the board. It looks like people loved meeting new athletes and hanging.
I was wondering, like, when we first got together, how kind of cliquey it would be. Like, maybe the CrossFitters would only want to hang out with the CrossFitters and not like us weird endurance athletes, and vice versa. But actually, like, everybody was so nice, and it was like adult summer camp. It was everybody hung out together. It was so fun.
It did get a little, like, there was a tiny bit of cliquiness. Like, at one point, I walked into a room and there was all these CrossFit like strength athletes. And they were all counting points for like the strength athlete who was doing best in order to beat the endurance athlete who was doing best.
The girls didn't do that.
And the girls.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was the girls. And I kind of like walked in and I was like, oops, like, I don't know if they wanted me to hear that, but so like, yeah, I think they were definitely like, if you're a runner, you would want to see the runner also, do the best, because it's like kind of your sport.
Well, they would have been previously friends with each other, so like that makes sense.
And maybe
that you
some of that
too.
But overall, it wasn't really cliquey or anything. Everyone was like super psyched. The only time that was like legitimate like competition was like the wrestling. Like, if you're standing in a ring and you have to wrestle someone, like it's like game on. Or also if you're competing for like neck and neck against someone, whether it's in a long race or whether it's in a decafit or whatever. If you're like going up against someone and they're right in front of you, you're going to push your hardest to beat them. And then it's like, you're not my friend until it's over.
Well, I want to talk about the wrestling because it certainly looks cool and people are having opinions about it. And there's a picture of Nicole, and there is a face Nicole is making that I've never seen Nicole make. Because I mean, I want to like blow it up and do the thing, but it's like, that's just fucking primal. I want to survive and I want to put you on the ground. And I know there's technique and all that. But I think it's going to look cool. I think it's going to make for great TV or YouTube, but people were saying like, oh, someone's going to get hurt. This is not good. So what are your thoughts on that?
I'm sure they'll air it, because when they first announced that we were going to do wrestling, like, they had told us that we weren't going to wrestle because we heard a rumor. And then all of a sudden they were like, are going to wrestle. And I was like, I spoke up about how I had issues with it because somebody would get hurt and because of COVID. Like, it's kind of weird to be right in each other's faces. But then at the same time, like, we've all been tested 3 times at this point. We spent the last 3 days together. So it's kind of a moot point, but I was also like, I'm fine with being like 2 feet away from somebody, but not like right here.
Having your face like breathing the same air.
Yeah. But so I guess there's the guy who lives on Joe's farm he's like a previous pro wrestler and he's Olympic level wrestler, and he coaches and stuff. So anyway, they changed the rules a bit so that we went.
Yeah, it was like a modified version of wrestling where you just had to like, if you touched the ground with a finger or knee or anything, the other person got a point. So it wasn't, there was nothing on the ground, and there was, so it was like a modified version of wrestling that,
he's done it with kids. And
he's done it all over the world and tested it with different groups. And it's like a slightly safer version.
Right. Because if I'm trying to get a point, right, and like reverse and trying to pin you, then like that's where more shit can happen rather than just, okay, you're on the ground, we get back up.
Yeah. And it was actually pretty safe. Like, I don't know, like
sand pit and
definitely there was still stuff that could have happened. Like, I had to wrestle this one girl, Emma, and she was the only girl with experience, and the girl that she wrestled before me got the wind knocked out of her. And then I was like, I have to go against her next. But also I like wrestled with a girl and I don't know what I'm doing, and there's like a picture where I'm just like basically slamming her in the mouth with my arm. I can send it to you. And I apologized to her after. I was like, I hope I didn't hurt you. And I was like, there's another match where I was grabbing clothing by accident, because it's basically just like, I don't know what I'm doing, just like grabbing anything that I can get a hold of. And then I was like, oh yeah, clothes aren't allowed.
I have a question for you, Lindsay. Typically you're used to like Ryan's usually finished and then you're coming in and you're like, oh, how did he do? But you got to watch him all weekend. What was that like?
Oh, I don't know. It was super fun. It was, they like reversed who would go first. So sometimes it was the girls, sometimes it was the guys, but Yeah, it was really nice to be able to cheer each other on the whole time and like watch what
like
he
you
was
got to watch me in the
and,
final OCR race.
Yeah, I had to watch him wrestle like this huge NFL linebacker, which was really nerve-wracking for me. But yeah, cheering you in the final was fun. I don't know, like obviously I've crewed for him at so many events and everything, so it's not like I haven't seen him race before. So I don't know.
What was it like for you, Ryan? What, getting to watch her and root for her like the whole time?
Yeah, it was great.
You're used to that.
Yeah.
you usually are able
Yeah,
to watch
it was really good. I gave her lots of tips in the wrestling, and I was able to kind of coach her through a bunch of things, and yeah, it was awesome.
It was hard between events because you're trying to prioritize recovery so much, and we only had so much time. So there was a couple times that he came up to me and he was like, "I'm so sorry, I missed the start of your event. Like I wanted to be there, but I had to get ready for mine, and I was like doing the Normatec legs and things like that, and eating." And I was like, "I get it," because yeah, sometimes the roles would be reversed, and I'd like have to miss part of his events. So.
Did you feel bad that you couldn't like spend the night together? You'd be like, okay, bye.
Yeah, it sucked actually not to be able to have a lot of time to like talk after the events and be like, this is how it went. I had this epic moment when, or like that we still haven't really talked about a lot of the events and had time to go over them because recovery literally was as hard as racing. It was not like physically, but it just was such a priority. That we'd finish the events and we wouldn't even really have time to like talk with each other. We would just be like, okay, now I have to go do this, this, and this. And yeah, so we have like a car ride together today. So we'll probably like go through all the events and hopefully I'll get to do lots of your highlights.
Are you going back to Canada?
No, we're gonna go to our house in Keaton, in the Adirondacks for a little bit.
Which house are you at now?
We're at Aaron Newell's house.
Yeah, in Queensbury.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're where are you going to be eventually? Like where are you going to spend your holidays?
In Canada, in Quebec. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Trying to figure out, we qualified for this race in the Azores, which is like an island off of Portugal, I guess. So we're trying to figure out if we can get there or not. But,
the Solomon Golden Trail thing.
Oh, let's talk about that. I saw there was something published. Is that the one you earned a golden ticket for? And so did Aaron?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so basically Solomon has this series called the Golden Trail series, and normally it's like 4 or 5 races that happen throughout the year, and it's like there's a bunch of them in Europe and like one in North America usually. But with COVID, they weren't able to do the series. So what they did instead is they made a bunch of Strava segments kind of worldwide. And I think there's 5 of them in the US. There was 1 in Canada. Most countries got 1 or like maybe 2. But of course the US got 5 because
huge population.
Yeah, they're the most important according to them. Just kidding. But yeah, so you had between like July and October 1st to run the fastest time, and whoever ran the fastest time wins the Golden Trail. The Golden Ticket. And the Golden Ticket, you get to go to their race in the Azores and compete in this 4-day stage race. So they replaced their whole Golden Series with a single stage race that lasts 4 days long. So 4 days of racing, back to back to back to back. And
it's like 35K a day. And then there's like a vert day and there's a speed day and there's like a downhill day.
Yeah. So
like it's all trail.
It's kind of a cool format, and it's pretty cool of them to do with respect to COVID happening and still getting people to race. And so yeah, we'll but we're not sure if we can even go or what the scoop is or how the travel.
They're actually saying they're not even letting US citizens into the Azores or Portugal right now. So like we're like, how's that work? And then because we're flying, we don't want to like go home to Canada, quarantine for 2 weeks, go to the Azores and come home and quarantine again. So we're just going to stay in the US. But then we're like, can we even, if we're flying from the US, can we even get in, even though we're Canadian citizens? I don't know. So
yeah, it's kind of up in the air, and Solomon is like not really answering emails. So it's
they're answering emails, but not COVID related questions they're ignoring. So, but anyway, I'm excited because usually at their races, you see a lot of the Solomon athletes are like the same sort of European top trail runners, but there's going to be so many dark horses that have won like segments and tickets that are going to show up at this event that normally wouldn't be there, which I think there's like a couple of the US runners are like, I don't know, Nicole knows of them and she's like, yeah, they're really good, but like I've never heard of them, never run against them. And a lot of like the European athletes who I see normally doing the races would never have heard of me. So I think it's going to be really exciting just to like have a whole new pool of really talented athletes and see how we do.
So what did you have to get, like what segment did you get to qualify?
So for us, they just made a course at a ski hill that was about 3 hours from our house. It was about 26 kilometers long, 15 or 1600 meters of climbing, up and down mountains and rivers, technical trails and stuff. And it was just one big long like circuitous loop. And Strava would just like generate the thing, and then that was your time. Well,
speaking of Strava, everyone was sending me anybody who had their Strava on during this weekend. So sorry to blow up your spot, but people were like, look at Ryan's thing. And even like Brent Dosher, who was like the photographer, was like, he posted his. And so I posted his. And did you just go private for a while? Are you going to go back public?
It's actually kind of funny because I asked Spartan before the event about that. I was like, well, what about like, can we post our Stravas after the races? And they were like, yeah, sure, we want you to do that. And I was like, okay.
And I was so confused.
And I was like, really?
Well,
people will figure out like who did what.
Yeah.
And then I think it was after the mountain bike or something. Nathan came up to me and he was like, did you post your Strava? And I was like, and he's like, you need to take that down like right now. And I was like, you said we could post them. And he's like, did I? And then he was like, oh shoot, but yeah, you still need to take it down. So then I just made them all private.
I knew that would happen. So mine's been private the whole time.
Well, honestly, I wasn't. None of those lifting people like were on Strava or whatever. So it's like, I didn't even think like, let's compare times. I just wanted to see like what you did. Like, oh, cool. Here's what they did. If it was all OCR people, then yeah, definitely we would have been like, who's faster than what? But that never even occurred to me. So I don't think it was that big of a deal. But yeah. We love following you, Ryan. So go back public, bro.
Yeah, I think there was only a couple events that you could even glean any useful information from.
Right. So and then they would tell us even like I didn't know. I saw the distance, but I didn't know, or I saw the time, but didn't know the distance. Like, hey, we did 5 hours of, 10 laps, but I didn't know what were the laps.
Right.
And then somebody eventually, I was just texting everybody, that eventually people told me what they were. When they laid out that first day, it was like a lot of stuff. And I was like, oh man, they're never going to get out to all this stuff. And then but it turns out just those Highland Games were pretty quick. So so then it was 3 things, but it was really one thing. So
it was only really 3 events that day because Highland Games was like condensed. They made like a game within a game of the Highland Games for the event. Yeah,
it's fun.
But yeah, overall it was an amazing experience. I think that like, I don't know, it's kind of like been a bit of a like a fantasy / like daydream of mine to like do something like this. It's kind of like when you hear CrossFitters say like, we're the fittest on earth. And I'm like, well, and then you hear like a runner say like, well, I'm a faster runner than you. And it's like, okay, but what if you took all these sports, like, and made everybody compete? Like, what would happen, So it's pretty cool that Spartan like did that and put it together.
I hope they don't call us the fit, like whoever wins is like not the fittest person on the planet, because I don't like that. It's like, I don't know. I like Battle of the Fittest. I think that's like
Battle of the Fittest slogan. Is like a cool slogan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they did a pretty good job too of casting it. There's a lot of like really good athletes from a lot of different disciplines. They had like an Olympic triathlete there. They had Xterra world champion Off-road triathlete, amazing athlete. They had, NFL linebacker. They had Hunter, who even knows what Hunter is anymore, but an awesome athlete.
Wait till you see Kellen Taylor run. So cool.
Yeah, they just had really good representatives from a lot of different sports and backgrounds. And could they have chosen? I was thinking about could they have chosen people that were different, and would that have changed the results? And yeah, maybe, but I don't think it would have changed that much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, funny thing, I interviewed Josiah having no idea he was a part of this thing. I had seen that he was on Eco Challenge, and I remembered that he had this battle with Hobie that I'd seen online, and that he was second in the first ever Spartan World Championship 2011 in Texas. And I was like, hey, do you want to come on the show? And so we talked about, his Xterra stuff. We talked about OCR, and he said, yeah, I was supposed to do this US National Series this year. I was going to do 2 or 3 of the US National Series races before COVID happened. And he never said, PS, in a week, I'm going to Joe. So I think it's so funny that now I'm going to call him and be like, hey, dude. So you'll hear my interview with him, listeners. But I did not know he was going to be there. When I saw he was going to be there, I was like, oh, that wily little cheeky bastard.
Yeah.
He's freakishly strong.
Yeah, he's an amazing athlete.
Yeah.
Well, I bet, I know Ryan had to know who he is, Ryan, because you keep up with all that stuff, right? All the bike stuff.
Yeah.
Because that was your discipline prior to OCR, right?
Yeah, I used to mountain bike race a lot.
So you knew who he was, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
He was a really good wrestler too.
Thanks for tuning in. You will find links in the description to all the other interviews, all of the event/workout things that happened up in Vermont. And as always, you can also click to support this channel. If you've been enjoying all this, go ahead, hit the Patreon, and decide to give at least a couple of bucks a month to your favorite OCR news situation. And that's me. Love you, miss you, mean it. I gotta run.